a lot of the environmental concerns and a lot of other things, such as taking care of veterans and doing a lot of the work that you achieved when you were a congressman. When you had to kind of walk away from that, was there any kind of topics or things that you felt like you still had work left to do when all of that was said and done?
Definitely, I felt like I still had work to do, and there was a one-term Republican congresswoman who defeated me in 2010, and then
Right.
she was in 2012. She lost to Sean Patrick Maloney, who is still in the Congress, and I hope and believe that he will win again this year, and he'll go into his third term. I don't agree with him on everything, but then, that's not really possible. I don't think hardly ever possible. I've never agreed with any presidential candidate in everything.
Right.
I've never, agreed with a senator I voted for. We have a system here. It's not really always voting for the lesser of two evils. It's that you vote, theoretically, you vote for your home, local representatives, city council members, town board members, school board members, county legislators, and then you also vote for your state legislators, your state senators, or what have you, and then you also ideally vote for your congressman, and you know who they are, and you vote in the off-year elections and the midterms, and you vote in the primaries, and then hopefully, because you're voting in other people, hopefully you're voting not just in the presidential years, but in all those other years, you wind up with good people, hopefully, the people that you voted for, hopefully, rising up through the ranks so that they're ready to run for higher office when somebody needs to.
Right.
And, that's my plea for, this year people are going to do what they want to do. I know it's hotly debated and sometimes not in a friendly fashion. But, I married into a West Point Republican conservative family.
Right.
My mother-in-law says that I'm the first Democrat she ever voted for. My nephew graduated from West Point. My brother-in-law graduated and also worked at the academy for a long time. My father-in-law is buried at West Point.
Right.
And when I got into Congress, I was asked by then Speaker Nancy Pelosi, if I could chair the Veterans Affairs Subcommittee on Disability Benefits and Memorial Affairs. And it was a very timely appointment because we had so many veterans coming back, especially at the time when we had many more forces in Afghanistan and Iraq than we have today.
Right.
That the injuries, the deaths and injuries were really at a much more frequent level, and the degree and the type of injuries were different than other wars. So we were getting a lot of amputations from roadside bombs, improvised explosives, as they like to call them,
Right.
and incoming mortar shells. When I was in Iraq, sleeping in the green zone twice, I was told in my little hut that I was sleeping in to wear my helmet and my body armor to sleep.
Jeez.
Because the week before they lost 2 soldiers there in the green zone to incoming mortar fire.
Wow.
So when people come back with PTSD, it's partly because there is no front and no rear. It's really a different kind of warfare where you never know what corner danger is going to lurk around. And you can't go back for rest and relaxation at the rear of the front.
Sure.
So I was aware of the fact when I got that appointment to the Vets Subcommittee on Disabilities that we had a flood of men and women in uniform who were coming back here with injuries that involved traumatic brain injury, PTSD, and loss of limbs, and various other severe injuries that immediately would make them unemployable or unable to do a job if they could get it, and that they were facing an epidemic of bankruptcy, divorce, homelessness, and suicide. And that the best thing that we could do to help them would be to try to get their benefits faster. At the time, it was a 6-month delay average from when a veteran filed his or her claim to when they would start receiving money from that claim. And I was determined that the money would start flowing immediately from when they filed. If any veteran has a severe, undisputed, disabling injury, like let's say you go over to Iraq or Afghanistan with 4 limbs and you come back with 3.
Right.
There's no question that it's service related, and it doesn't take a genius of a doctor to say this person's disabled and is going to need to go through serious rehab to recover from this injury and get to a point where he or she will be able to join the workforce. So they're going to get 100% disability, until or unless that's corrected and treated successfully.
Right.
So that's part of the Veterans Bill that I passed, the Veterans Claims Modernization Act of 2008, which was passed unanimously in both the House and the Senate and signed into law by President George W. Bush in his last term. And he called it his signing statement, he called it good government. And I, a Democrat who was not fond of everything that President George W. Bush did, was surprised, pleasantly surprised, and encouraged by the fact that not one senator or congressman voted no, and that the Republican president signed it into law gladly. And that tells me that there is common ground.
Right.
I mean, what about clean water? Can we find common ground on the fact that anybody living in the United States on a municipal water system or not has a right to clean drinking water, and that if the aquifers are polluted or if the source of water for a city or a municipality is polluted, that the cost of remediating that will be paid by either the business that polluted it or by the government, and not have another Flint, Michigan, where people are unknowingly drinking lead in their water because in a cost-cutting measure, an appointed city manager decided to switch them off of Great Lakes water, like Huron water in this case, which was pure enough to drink, so far anyway, and having them drink water from the Flint River. I mean, those things should not happen.
Sure. I mean, it's incredible.
The place I would look for common ground would be infrastructure. We passed an infrastructure bill in the House that was, I was also on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and it was a bipartisan bill that we passed that would have rebuilt our roads and bridges and sewage treatment plants and water filtration systems and schools and airports, and hired hundreds of thousands of construction workers in the process of doing so, and engineers and architects and designers, and it was held up by a Republican filibuster in the Senate and never saw a vote.
Jeez.
So I think that we should be able to find common ground on things like that. If you can start with veterans, clean water, infrastructure, and then look for more, find out what's next. There's got to be more that a majority of these people and a majority of our representatives can agree on, so we don't have gridlock. We ought to be able to move from one issue to another and pass the laws and the budgets to take care of them.
Knowing that you've had this kind of first-hand experience with that process, it seems almost kind of crazy that some of these basic human rights, like the water in Flint, is being allowed to happen. It's kind of extraordinary. When you left the Congress, did you see that understanding starting to change as the last few years have unfolded? Did you see that there's a shift, I guess, within Congress?
Well, it's definitely changed, and it hasn't changed for the better.
Right.
And part of that is due to redistricting, that there was a concerted effort made by the Republican Party nationwide to try to win state legislatures and governorships. And if you can do that, if you control both houses of a state legislature, you can draw the redistricting lines any way you want.
Right.
And I'm not saying that they shouldn't have done it. I mean, it's just that people weren't paying attention to this, and they should have been. And I'll include myself in that. Democrats were shooting for higher, for a higher level. They were looking at president or senator or congressman, but they weren't paying as much attention to the states, governorships and legislatures as maybe they should have. And so they kind of let it go by. And this last census, the 2010 census, which came, the same year as the Citizens United decision, elected, thanks to the Republican Party's hard work, it elected a lot of Republican state legislatures, which then redrew the lines so that there are that many more safe Republican seats.
Right.
And they lumped a lot of Democrats together so that we had fewer Democratic seats, but they were very safe. And so there's that, and there's also the fact that now we have corporations, including foreign-owned corporations, being permitted to dump unlimited amounts of what we call dark money because it's not reported,
right,
or it doesn't get reported until after the election is over, if ever, and goes through these super PACs that don't have the same disclosure requirements as an individual candidate would have. So yes, it's harder now, but I don't believe that it's impossible. And I think that underneath, I hope enough of our elected officials have some civic duty and conscience that they will put above party, because we're really not in a time where we can afford to have a constant election.
Sure.
However this election goes, we have to get it behind us and find a way to relate to each other, talk to each other, and unite behind those issues and those causes that we can find common ground on, because that's really who we are, and that's how we preserve our democracy. So that's something I'm hoping for.
I mean, obviously, this presidential race is coming up. We're a little over a week out from it. I've never seen anything like this in my entire life, where so much craziness is occurring. And you touched up on it when we first started. What is your thoughts going in with a week left?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball, but I can say that I would like to see, because I come from the entertainment field, so I'm not Donald Trump. I didn't have a reality TV show that was a hit for years, so I'm not a household name.
Sure.
Like Donald Trump was. But I did come from the entertainment field. The main difference between us is I served for nothing, for no money, for 4 years on the school board in my town.
Right. And
I had to campaign for a job that you don't get paid for and you don't get any benefits for. And I had the power, the board, 9 board members, including me, power to levy a property tax or to raise it or to lower it. And we had the power to decide what classes and how many teachers and what class size our children of the district would have, whether the band was going to have new instruments or the sports teams could have new equipment.
Sure.
Stuff that parents generally tend to care about. And no matter what decision you make, people are still mad at you.
Right.
And for that, you get to leave your family at home having dinner and have a couple of gulps and then go down to the administration building and sit in a board meeting that lasts till after midnight. It's really a volunteer job. And also because you don't run as a member of a party, you really have to learn how to build a consensus and to compromise and to find allies and sometimes they're different on one issue than another.
Right.
Because everybody there ran as an individual. You might have a 5-4 split on one vote, and then a 6-3 a different way on another vote, depending on what the issue was. So, it's really helpful to learning how to work with other people. And so when I look for a candidate for higher office, I look for somebody who's done that kind of volunteer work sometime in their life. And as Hillary did when she volunteered with the Children's Legal Aid Fund, and when she worked for no money or minimal money, appointed by the judge to represent indigent people in, as a defendant, a defendant's attorney in criminal cases. I mean, these are things that any lawyer can tell you have to be done. Somebody has to do it. The way our Constitution is written, everyone has a right to a fair trial, which means they have a right to an attorney. And so we shouldn't be, with some exceptions, I suppose, we shouldn't be angry at the attorneys, we should, if we could be angry at the jury, we could be angry at the system in some other ways, or sometimes maybe at the way the judge comported him or herself. But, don't blame the attorney for taking a case if a judge orders him or her to do it.
Right.
So, at any rate, I was thinking this morning in the shower, where I do some of my best thinking, that it would be interesting to try to organize, and I'm the kind of person I think who might be able to do this, at least in my Hudson Valley home area here in New York,
Right.
to organize some meetings of people who were for Donald Trump and people who were for Hillary Clinton, or people who were coming from the conservative side or from the libertarian side or Republican side, from the green. I know this could be, a substantial green vote in this area too, and get people together to talk about, to listen to each other. We have to move past this attack mode.
Sure.
Where I've got friends and relatives that I basically can't talk politics with at all.
Right.
And I don't like that. My next door neighbor, is a good guy, family man, works hard, drives a cherry picker truck for the utility. Last I knew, and apparently I think he still does. He's helped me find my dogs when they were lost.
Right.
He's helped me when my generator wouldn't start in a blackout. He came over with a can of ether and sprayed it into the carburetor. Things started right up.
Right.
He's a good guy to have as a neighbor. I don't know this because I've never asked him, but I think he's probably voting Republican in this election.
Sure.
And he's got a sign out protesting a law here in New York that provides some restrictions on gun purchases that don't exist in other states that I think are sensible, and it's called the SAFE Act in New York that he wants to repeal. But, I like having a neighbor like him.
Sure.
We've had friendly conversations about all kinds of things, and I just think we ought to start breaking these walls down as soon as the election's over, because we should understand each other. If we don't, if the different poles of the electorate don't understand each other, things aren't going to be good in the future, no matter who wins.
Right.
And, that requires getting your information from more than one source. People shouldn't listen just to MSNBC or watch just MSNBC or just Fox Network, or they shouldn't listen just to Rachel Maddow, or,
Sure.
or listen just to Rush Limbaugh or Hannity. It's like, you have to, if you want to really know the whole story, you have to listen to what everybody's saying and try to dig into it, doing some research on your own. Because with the internet now, that's possible. And so I would encourage everybody to do that. And I think in all of our states, in all of our communities, that there's going to be some healing needed, and hopefully it will be done sincerely. And the next election can be more civil than this one, and it won't be an embarrassment to the United States or around the world.
Right.
I know there have been people in Europe and in the UK saying, will this be the end of the 240-year-old American, tradition of democracy? Some people thought that it was the end when the Supreme Court awarded presidency to George W. Bush.
Sure.
By stopping the Florida recount. But if you remember, Al Gore immediately said, once that decision came down to the Supreme Court, he said, I'm conceding to President-elect Bush, and the country needs to stand behind him. He's my president.
Right.
And there were those in his own party who thought that he should have fought longer. But he didn't. He held the good of the country above his own wishes and his own ambition. And we need at least some people in public office who have that spirit, and enough of us as citizens and voters need to have the same spirit and to share it, because, we survived. We have survived a lot in our nation's history, and let's hope we have a lot of history in front of us still.
Exactly. John, I got to say, I really enjoyed having you on the program and talking about all of these topics, and also your book. I know that listeners are going to be ecstatic to pick it up. It's called A Rock and Roll Journey to Congress and Back, and they can pick it up at your website, johnhallmusic.com, and also at amazon.com. John, I want to thank you so much for sharing your morning or afternoon where you're at with us, and sharing all these great stories and your perspective. I want to thank you so much again for being on the program.
My pleasure, Eddie. Thanks so much for asking me. It's been a good talk, and I'm really honored to be on your air. So hope we meet in person sometime.
I would love that.
Look forward to that. Okay. Bye-bye now.
You got it. Bye-bye. There he is. John Hall.